Recording in progress.
O sanje chodan soje chanala
Chanchi Bode Dane Jasunji Dagi Chunye Jibi Sunanji Dala Benje Sanje Dubo Shio Sanje Chara Sanje Chara Chanchi Bode Dane Jasunji Dagi Chunye Jibi Sunanji Dala Benje Sanje Dubo Shio Sanje Chara Sanje Chara Chosu Je Dagi Chiso Jibi Sunanji Dala Benje Sanje Dubo Shio Jing Bo Jo On Ben Za Bo Me A Wan Chi Se Je Sa Je On Ben Za Ren Ge A Xie Jia Ri Gui Ge Gui Wu Zi Ri Ja Bo De Ra Jia Le Ma Bo Ren Zang Bo Le Ni Ba La Jia Jia De Ni Ni Le Da Le Ba Nga Ya Da Nga Ya Ye Yuan De Da Lan Ju De Da Mi Ni Da Da Mi Ni Ye Da Rinpo Chi Ri Wu Pa San Ji Shen Den Je Pa Ma Mo Pa Ye Lo Do Ko Lo Rinpo Chi Lo Bo Rinpo Chi Tsun Mo Rinpo Chi Lun Bo Rinpo Chi Lang Bo Rinpo Chi Tan Qiu Rinpo Chi Ma Bo Rinpo Chi Ten Shi Bo Ye Bo Ba Yin Mo Ma Che Wa Ma Lu Ma Ka Ra Ma Me Do Ma Do Bo Ma Na Se Ma Chi Cha Ma Nye Ma Da Wa Rinpo Chi Do Cho Le Na Ba La Da Mi Ya Ben Je Bo Su So Ba Ma Sa Wa Me De Da Chi Chi Sa Wa Da Ji Ba Chi Pa De La Ma Ta Ba Yong Ji Gi Vi Shin Ye Chi Gi Shi Yi Shi Dan Ge Pe Zong Yang An Ne Te Ba Chen Bu Song Chi Zong Bo Ji Yu De Yen Gang Bo Wa Jiu Tu Jin Zhe Yue Dun De Jie Si Zi Jie Ne Jia Dan Su Ma Jie Na Ta Dan Nian Bie Se Jie Tan Ji Ji Zhi Nie Jia Su Nie Nie De Lo De Su Sa Xie Bo Jiu 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 Na
대양 공부를 좀 해서 그래서 가시 선녀 renje treba is kanshi semne renje treba ngenju chakbar ki batwe ja kanshi miru kene tikbele ki batane chero lumba lasa o she sumbata ngara zurwa kyo sujine yawa ida tandula soba tinde maji beche milia kene sura kyo kanshi mine kene chikchutube samlo yuna yage chutube tubtunge samlo tantunge chege kugabiyange tende cha ne sungo re ne sungora kyo kanshi miru kene kanshi miru kene mare kanshi senne renji trebas e chane suda tena michilia serke rambuche ne tsachi bushibuchi yobache ne koran kyobache rawa ente rambuche ne tsachi bushibuchi yobache te ko ke hamago she rawa kanshi senne renji ko tene kenyi lu sen da tende da kubwe ju sen da tende che pechi chi yore sera kanshi senne renji trebas sergi ne rambuche pe rinda me tende te shengechi ko te tsachi bu ba hamago she mide ane kenyi lu sa da 저걸 넣어서 르벌 넣어서 죽바 주스라 죽바 주는 텐데 제니 배치세번 세번 나서라 제 나서 배 방법으로 와서 와라 강시 교 강시 신뢰라리아 설진의 전부신 그 배치른다데 저배치 요새 대코 자천부인 바하마고 세 아니 죽바 주스다 괜히 루서던데 배치세 나서 와라 배 방법을 해서 거라 강시 신뢰를 지대와 연구 착발기 봐서 코란 쪽으로 되어래 대배제 여부전에 코란 쳇들 기는 메시안라 앞에 나오시오지요라 어디 맞아서 하마고 신에서 거라 강시 신뢰를 지대와 연구 착발기 봐서 대배 방법을 해서 될래자서 가라서 밀게네 강시 미르게네 대배래 기버더니 체럽을 발았어 그래서 밀레킨 단다치 교화마두체 센데라 소소 대화용게 심어패절라 소소리아 교화다 대화용에 주디 교화마두체 디버사게 되나 송거라 가시 미르케네 디벨레 기바테네세 디벨레 땅가자고라 미교 주디 디벨레 바틴도 저 교화주임바 대단대시 자주 샘이제 공야 잠바 공야 세바 공야도 상마데 교화로와 tin doctor de tebaro konto tanga je dan trado dan dressel de zama kashmir ke ne tebele kibatene che rablu bala te do lumbu nane lumba kubba nane te tewe jan kubba de sigara o teach lamna.
So here, as stated by the master Nagarjuna, whoever if they had a golden, like a jeweled vessel, and were to use that for a trash can or to like put in filth, that would be something quite stupid. But even stupider, even worse than that, is someone who, born as a human, uses their life for non-virtue. So again, we have this kind of birth. We haven't been born as a hell being, a hungry ghost, an animal. We have a human rebirth wherein we are able to accomplish the Dharma. We have the intellectual capability. We have the knowledge. We can understand what we should and shouldn't do. But like this example, if you have someone who is impoverished, but they don't recognize that they have something really precious, they have this like golden vessel encrusted with jewels, which could be of much value, could help alleviate their poverty. But instead, if they were to use that kind of precious vessel as like a trash can, as something to put filth in, like something to vomit into, we would look at that as what a horrible situation they're in, or sort of how silly, how poor is that they don't recognize the value of the thing that they have, and they're not using it to help themselves or to help be able to get into a better situation, but instead are using it in this sort of base way. And so, too, those of us who have been born as a human but don't use our life that we have right now to do virtuous activities. I mean, some of us just don't even think about it. We know what the virtuous actions are and what the 10 non-virtues are. We know the kinds of things that we should and shouldn't do. But if we decide not to do that, we decide not to use this life to make an effort at abandoning the 10 non-virtues and doing things that are virtuous, to developing bodhicitta and love and compassion, all of which we have the capacity to do, but instead use this kind of human life in a way where we engage in non-virtues. We allow ourselves to get angry and competitive and jealous and hateful. That's really the most stupid thing you could do. There's been nothing stupider than that, nothing more foolish than that. So like this example given by Nagarjuna, we should recognize the kind of value of the life that we have and not allow it to go to waste in kind of meaningless and negative activities.
Sử dụng nó để làm những tội lỗi. Thì cũng giống như một người mà không biết cái thân người này là quý báu, giống như không biết cái bình bằng vàng ngọc là quý, cho nên nó sử dụng nó để đụng rác rưởi và đồ dơ.
Ôi anh chứ sao? Ôi ta từng đó, cả số đó. Sẽ nhìn thấy ta cái thọ la tăng ấy na, về lâm bờ để phong bờ rồi, để phong bờ, phong bờ để sẽ rồi. Lâm bờ để có hàm bờ, về cục bờ để, nếu phong bờ sẽ ra rồi, coi ra chỗ bờ sẽ, để trên đây rồi bờ sẽ áp chịu, thì hàm có tao sẽ bị mẹ sẽ ra. Thế là cha số ra, ngara rồi mình lấy thom này. Anh tích về lấy chuyện cái gì, lâm bờ để để phong bờ để sẽ ra. Số mình lấy thom cái gì thọ này, rồi. 세대 되기 거기 렘부치 되는 세대 거제이나 그때 아버지 하고는 세대를 되기 용해요라 세대 세고 내면을 소바테 용을 못을 라버지 용해요 말아 이나 가라도 밀려도 바테 사물 소소 사물 당시나 춘에서 사물 당나 소소 세대를 되기 용을 줘래 저 아침에 벤제게는 소소 템바다 대화 되기 뒤에 용도가라 템바테 뚝뚝가라 어디 있는 가라도 소소 밀리도 아침부에 무시 쉬버지 삼사태고라 뒤다가서 돈다 매봐야 디버사 밀리 사와체 이러와 민비스바 미키버서 딘데체다네 고 디버사요라 딘데팅아서 니린 메세나ල් 미던 저와치도 지존나 대도 용구라 디디장 서바고요라 서바고나 디디 공구라 디 콘도사디 서바고메 디면 서베 가르치죠. 저 가르치기 마셔라. 차도를 지금도 어디 차도 제요 말해서 미리 아분도는 재수이랑 제고를 해라. 디마전에 미리 차도 제서 차도 제 콘도사서 콘도사는 저 거에게요 말아. 다시 저 사가를 제를 맡아지. 디가라도 저 냥게도 생기 상말 야고지고라. 디가서 텐데텐데 리도지기도 저 생게 있나요? 이만 출생계 미치와래 출세도 야부시요라 서바 공부를 지지지오를 차도 지지요 말에 미다보 공부에서 다코란한테 지지요 말에 애네 뒤코란 로마지 뒤래 이케란디 셰페 야부시도 이나 케란디 덕저다다 강가지도 하세래 어디고 우두라 당에 셰베 강가지 네 셰베 강가 마시로 쳐자래 거래 계셔래 내 셰브 상무시에서 내 셰브 강가 마시서 나를 믿던 마시서래 어떤 데서를 차야 내가 와라 어디 시켜나
So here, the meaning of this is really like to have something like a jewel encrusted golden vessel that is of great value, to just use it in a very base way and to not actually use it to alleviate your poverty. I mean, that's something that's stupid. It's a great waste. This person is in a situation where they have something so valuable. They could actually get out of their situation, but they don't use it as such. And so, even more so than that kind of a situation, I mean, such a person who has something valuable in their hands, okay, they can sell that vessel and make something for this life. But it's not just stupid and a waste to let this life go as well. I mean, it's really quite a sad thing. If we recognize the sort of value of the life that we have, then we would use it to be of benefit in the present as well as in our future lives, to be of help and benefit, knowing that if we do virtue and avoid non-virtue now, not only will our life now be happier, but also into the future. So this really is dependent upon our remembering how precious it is, recalling that and keeping it in mind. If we, talk about doing the Dharma, but then we go around in the world and do harm to others, we hurt them and we inflict violence and so forth. We don't actually, say, practice patience in the face of difficult situations, then really what's the point of the Dharma? If we're still going around and, getting jealous of others and feeling competitive, why are we listening to this? We need to use the kinds of skills that we have learned. We need to apply patience rather than getting jealous of someone's success or good fortune. Rather, we should rejoice in that. So there was a person before who, like, I mean, this is important for the people who are explaining as well as those listening. There was someone who used to give teachings on the Dharma, but, all about patience and all about developing good attitude and so forth. But his student noticed, like, when he went out into the world, he did none of that. And so he sort of asked, this student asked him, and I mean, this teacher was embarrassed to admit, yeah, I'm good at saying it, but not actually doing it. And so here, we shouldn't let that be the case, where it just becomes something that we hear and we listen to. Rather, it needs to be what we do in our daily life. We are hearing, listening to these various things in order to be able to implement them. And that's really how we don't let our life go to waste. We take its value, we take its essence.
Nhưng mà ông không có sống với giáo pháp, cho nên người đệ tử mới nói rằng ôi tại sao thầy nói pháp rất là hay nhưng mà thầy không có làm được những cái điều mình nói. Cho nên chúng ta phải hết sức cẩn thận khi chúng ta nghe và nói, thì mình phải là những người là thực hành và những cái gì mình nói và những gì mình nghe.
어디 있어라. 어다 던다 가라지 밀리토가 들어와. 자침부 시부지 임바다. 대전에 주마도 제다와서 선대지부 던다 파서 주나. 방부 임바 lumbu 임바라. 딜레 lumbu 맹게. 디 컨디 삼로 거버스나. 가라지 따버시 밀리아 겸미 콘덴시세 지와다. 도가지 고버로 시스통고 있어라. 그래서 교치고 말해 교치만 여와이다 돈을 끼어서 쉬고 말해서 요 말해서 교치마 요는 가지고 일단 밤자고 그랬어 요 말해서 요나 쉬고 말해서 미신은 밀기 그랬어 돈을 끼고 말해 요와 끼고 말해서 루 때문에 루 끼기도 와서 때문에 끼기도 와서 현대 끼고 말해서 군주 꾸버서 시대 생비어라 tender라 지자게요라 어디서 하나씩 미신은 밀리게 병이요 말아. 근데 이나다 리그와 미 소보디 유지는가 미르와. 네 샘데 참모치 도샤데 샘데 거 가와이나 겨랑사 질리 던돌 케나 가와케나 실케스나 던도 차도라. 소보디를 마도셰 샘데 거 다가라. 메셈 중부 소보를 때는 샘 중부 최전에 제 동부 상부당 동부 뒤에 말와 소보 거란을 바고치 사야라나 통해라나 삼 소소 신나를 듣는 신나도 야고면도 삼도 천주 가시 고토라다 아마도 자신분 가라서 미삼을 나시 고토 말아 어디도 가서라 밀려도 다가식 벤조라지 상게 임베서라시라 벤조시 사트 사오르와 코스침 론지 거라 오마 주변으로 소래 라 가서라 저 말이 대왕은 되시 대왕도 그래서라 다 내가 되어라 대왕은 되시 미 대화대야 아니 롱주 매나 요구 말이잖아. 사회 통해 공에 강가 자주 보시거라. 디 매나 거라 말이지. 디스브레 장장 대리 마도 쉬어지다 삼루 자신 뭐 고야 거라 영야요 말아. 디손자 진부 개시부를 소교하라. 진부 당순나 진부 당고래서 롱주 신디 말이 겨와치마 롱주 전부 연구래서 미기 쭉 방바이나 진부마다나 저나 미껴보 싶은데 그래. 야나 던들 있겠네. 던들 나려 초부신 붙여줘야 루단 던들을 치라. 때 초부 차야요라. 진부당에 제부디 미 루딘을 민기 말해서 거라. 디미나니 야 진부당에 던도도 마서 양 때문에 디 롱제 양 때문에 야 마루마루에 그거 비워라. 됐습니다. 롱제 거리도. 디 거리도 소소 튕기 루 소톱도 지어다. 디레마도 디레라버지 개요 말해. 사체단에 자치단 베티지도와 마다네 요 말해. 소보코랑 거에도 따다지 거라. 디존에 디레라버지 제게요 말아. 디레라버는 다시 뱅이 자와데 차치 비르체 미토볼로 버르체 딘데 제야데네 다 교와체 마소소 랑주 요아이들 패도라. 너는 납때도 때도 버스. 소소신은 너를 여버리지네 상마샤 도야데마도 기획해요 말아. 진보당치 딘데 제베는 납다당치 도가 가르네 딘데 봐 진보당이네. 때를 배우나 시리즈래. 때를 배워서는 잘라라지 배셔니 제마소서 수도야요라. 맨날 주변에 시리다 제마소 수도야요서 그래. 지자 지당 진보 개심부를 롱주 개심부를 해서래. 롱주 매나니 대화 연구 말에 매나 초지도 삼탕야요 말에. 이나 그 롱주 들라고 세시요라. 산지 좀 된데 초 당부 송도자 도시된 바테도자 벤조도 소보 수답데 우메람치 송을 당부 엄마데 그 생각을 라임바 칼라 마세베 제 니메치 추 어느 소보라 칼레테 텐데체나 팀 만디브레스 거라 티 탈을 홍바래 소보라 칼레테 요마레스 거라 다 망다 추네 초시 메버데서다 지티주나 팀메데 틸레라가 강바세 잡나 팀메데 단다 틸레라 그치 소야게 말이 되버려 소야게 말아 근데 멤버스 거라 소아데 우메람세 메시 계단데 사야 통해 거야 참 우마거래 때 교부치는 처음에도 그때는 강행이구나 근데 멤버 다 멤버지 가리는데 너 잠불에 소소 와서네 단다 그 삼기라 현다주 지르섬 현다주 제가 도나 삼기라 어디데 촉식고라 깔려잡고래 저 너르산에 랑게 빼주제 현달에 편도 가리네 지어라 뒤인데 뒤집을 돈달을 뒤버서 메시지께다네 방부시라라 어디인데 다 돈당하라 좀 밀려토바데 배 신들의 대화대 소소 삼물단에 지어라 소소 삼물단 마신에 소소 도보셔야 그래 마게 타도 댄세 마디게 가게 삼물단에 미기버셔야 디 매우서야 된다 추송거라 추세대 소소 샘의 대화용에 된다 추송거라 신들의 대화시 텔레테네니 챈들 쉐디 제베네 소소 대화 미 지소 대화 강가 디기 줄을 두고와라 디 제스네 쮸바 야고 지고와라 챤람 야고 지고라 지소라 개와 두고와라 디네네 개와 치마 남미 데부 소데 개와 치마 개와 상불랭게레 대화 장자 용그레스 어디 송고와라 디가라 삼루 코르코데 추세데 나베 추데 소데 소소 셈라 시데 용하다 셈행 잡고야 틸 추나시잖아 콘돔 맞아 나게 맞아 타도 맞아 댄셈 초르다 담보 강가데 니마샤네 멤버스르네 신데세토 마로 니네 검시전 대견이야 삼나 디게와데 고 견이 버데 삼도 드링에 콘도테스 타도 제스 생각이 쳄삼 딘딘마송 삼나 대견이 버데 삼로시네 디르가 디테상 마로 땅에 드리 콜 콘도 야부텐토스 지지체토스 삼단다 보시라 어디에 가서라. 그래서 저는 바하고는 또스마 뉴르다네 걸걸이 뉴르요라. 기능 알아서 소소 셈을 삼다. 셈이랑시 회사와 만남을 로브로 와서 나도 상만상제 요래서 거라 나베다와티레. 소소 상제 좀 되는 시 소소 자야 요래 심기 뼈 정말 봐세 연대 상마 랑도르네 상마 생게 차서 아니 상제로 그 강가 봐상 시제 상마 로드게 탑도 싫으니까 다시는 상제서 오라 나란조 대차야 요래 가래서 나란조 셈데 따바르 셈이 진제들로 콘도 사피뱅 해요 말에 콘도 마세 대한도가 추당 남가는 신이래 추녀빠지 교라 남가도 준비티베라 이 남가랑시 당마레스 추랑시 당마레스 예시어스 티 산제지르 여삼부라 나저 야제르 여삼부라 나저 소소 지된 제바 보이는 게 시나 쉬이나 다 kunjo 가르치네시 가와당나다 삼바도 소소케요 말에 남바 산제베 시티 말에 지삼기요 말에 kunjo 랍잖나야 돼 산제 그 랍잖나야 돼 예삼 디나신 소소 내가 전에 소소 전에 양주에 인상 보라 나랑 전에 야 괜찮만 빵 연대 상만 좀 나랑 줘야 요삼자 소소려 뽑을래 거라 지대 제바 보여봐다 매번 소소 개체원이데 소소 개체원을 해야 돼 나부터 와라 어디 누다던다 소소로 한 밀리터 같아 사진 보여봐다 초람바다 지대 대화 개와 침말을 되게 용게 림베네 동일에 땐도 타와 산제지 고와 토와 저기에서 대체도 안에 딜랑관로서 산제 송셔베 최대 년년에 더버체 되는 소소 삼로다 가요요지 냠리지 안고 주기에 삼 대체도 최년기에 삼베나 거차 토부샤르 타르와다 탐제킨 바토지기 사변샤르 sem부터 네바샤르 어디 가서 근데 삼로다 네 최선 버쇼스 어디서 다도서 망도 그래 중요 뒤뒤제 송산들다 내 거라 겹시 그래 내가 참상아 신빙 저도 디셰서데 로자를 띵고 삼을 시도해 기대서 딱히 결과서 남네 야부라 어때 야부다 탈탈탈 단지 상황에
Okay. So sometimes Geshe-la forgets to let the translator go a little bit, gets maybe distracted. But so here we have obtained this human life, and really we should think about how precious it is. This is something that is so incredibly precious, and to just work for this life, to try to sort of sustain ourselves or get the things that we want in this life is really foolish. That's something that's quite a waste. So the Chinese used to say, though, to the Tibetans, sort of making fun of them, that like, oh, well, what does it matter? I mean, if you plant a bean seed, you get a bean plant. If you plant a barley seed, you get a barley plant. As a human, if you're all gonna like die, we could just kill all of you. You'll be born again as a human, because if you're a human now, you're going to be a human in the future. But that's not the way that we Buddhists think about it. I mean, this kind of subtle mind that we have that travels from life to life can take on different bodies, can be in a different situation. And so if we were, say, to be born as an animal, we wouldn't have the same sort of capacity of awareness. It's sort of like you're in a more dull situation. You don't have the same sort of vividness, alertness of mind and awareness. And we really, as an animal, your focus is much more narrow on just trying to take care of certain day-to-day sorts of things. You're not able to have the kind of vast perspective of a human. And so here, we shouldn't think only in terms of like just this life, but recognize that the Dharma, it will be of benefit to us in this life. And it will be of benefit to us in future lives as well. And so one of the things that is emphasized at the beginning is practicing generosity. Like, we all want to have happiness, and we all need to have enough. And so as Chandrakirti has stated in the entry to the Middle Way, that really as beings in the desire realm, our happiness, at least temporary happiness, is dependent upon having enough, right? So if we don't have enough to sustain ourselves, there's no way to work with our mind to pursue the Dharma. And so we want to make sure that with our ethical conduct, we engage in generosity, which is sort of like, we could say, like hiding a treasure for the future, right? We need to have enough to sustain ourselves, to take care of our needs. But really, we don't want to be in some sort of excess. We should think about the fact that engaging in generosity, again, again is sort of like putting money in the bank for future lives, such that we are able to have the ripening of both our ethical conduct and a good rebirth, and then having the kinds of necessary possessions and things to be able to sustain ourselves in a comfortable way. So when the Buddha first taught, he taught the middle path, right? We had talked about this last time, that engaging in extreme asceticism is not the way to go, like starving yourself or doing those kinds of extreme practices, but nor do we want to go to the other extreme of needing so much. So if we have enough for ourselves and we are able to sustain ourselves, then really we can use the rest for generosity, for example, which is creating those kinds of causes. We're planting the seeds, like burying a treasure that we will be able to open later in future lives. And so here, instead, if we are to use our life in a way where we're not thinking about keeping ethics or doing generosity or other things, but really are just allowing ourselves to engage in non-virtue, we don't know, like we're going to quite regret that. I mean, there is a way in which we need to know how to think about things, that working with our mind is something that makes us happier now and brings benefit in the future. Like sometimes it feels like, say, giving into our competitiveness or our jealousy or our anger or our hatred, it feels like that's the good thing to do. But really, if we are to reduce those sorts of minds, then we can come to see that we are much happier without them. And it's not like sort of flipping a switch, like you're turning on light and all of a sudden these things are gone, but rather it is something that we begin by seeing those minds as faulty. We see that they are destructive and causing us harm and not doing anything beneficial now or in the future. And so once we see that they are faulty, we can begin to reduce them, to apply the proper antidote, and eventually be able to get rid of all of our faults and actually develop both the method and wisdom side to their fullest and become a fully enlightened Buddha. Because we all have that capacity. As it is said, the nature of mind is clear light. All of the stains are adventitious. They are merely temporary. We, just like the Buddha that came before, we have the same kind of materials. We have the capacity to, on the basis of this mind, this clear light mind, be able to improve ourselves such that we too can become like a Buddha. If you're someone who accepts, say, a creator who is omnipotent, then you don't need to do anything. You're in their hands and you let them do what they're going to do. But as Buddhists, the onus is on us. The responsibility on us is to improve. And it actually, there's the side of this where we need to gain a kind of confidence. We're not just sort of at the whims of some creator, but rather we have this agency and capacity to develop our mind and develop it all the way into that state of Buddhahood, wherein we have removed all faults and developed all good qualities. And so here we should have this kind of certainty based upon the preciousness of this life that we have, that we're not going to waste it, but rather we're going to use it in meaningful ways by approaching the Dharma in a way with a recognition that that will bring us happiness in the temporary, but also benefit in the long term. And so with that kind of recognition, we should think that we are going to, listening to the Dharma, we are placing really strong imprints for our future liberation and omniscience. Those are the seeds that we are laying down. And these imprints, however thick we make them, so much we will benefit in the future. So we should set our motivation thinking we are going to listen to this Dharma, try to put as much of it into practice as we can in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings by attaining that state of perfect, complete enlightenment. So please take this time to, I have gone sort of in circles, and so I, as the translator, have tried to summarize a little bit of what Geshe-la has said, but really let's take the time to recognizing this precious life that we have and its capacity through this clear light nature of mind, gain a kind of confidence that we too have that ability, and setting a motivation for highest complete enlightenment. We should think we're going to listen to these teachings, and they're not something that we can immediately put all of it into practice, but slowly over time we can develop develop and improve and have that capacity to become a fully enlightened Buddha. So with that kind of motivation, please think in that way for now listening to the teachings.
Thì để làm tâm chúng ta được an tịnh và bình yên. Cho nên khi tu tập không nghĩa là giống như cái mặt trời nó phát ra ánh sáng, nó liền trừ tiêu diệt bóng tối. Cho nên là nó phải có một cái tiến độ và cái thời gian. Cho nên khi chúng ta tu tập là chúng ta thấy những cái tâm niệm tiêu cực, tham sân si, kiêu ngạo ghen tị là những cái tâm sai lầm. Và khi tức giận ghen tị thì là mình biết là nó sai lầm, cho nên mình sẽ tìm cách giảm dần. Chứ nhiều người không biết điều đó, mà khi mình tức giận ai mình sẽ nói những cái lời mà cho người kia, nói cho hả dạ, thì mình không biết rằng còn tự hào nữa, tôi đã làm được cái chuyện đó, tôi đã làm cho người kia là vân vân. Cho nên kia mình nhận đó là lỗi lầm, mà mình còn tự hào mình đã phát khởi lên những cái tâm niệm tiêu cực đó nữa, thì những người như vậy thì sẽ không có tiến bộ. Cho nên chúng ta nghĩ rằng bản tâm của mình nó vốn là trong sáng, những cái tâm niệm tiêu cực nó chỉ giống như là những cái khách trần, nó chợt đến chợt đi, nó không phải bản tâm của mình. Cho nên làm thế nào để chúng ta loại trừ toàn bộ những cái nhiễm ô và những lỗi lầm trong dòng tâm thức, và thành tựu toàn bộ những tri thức, những thiện đức lành. Tâm thức có thể nhận biết tất cả các pháp, chứng tri tất cả các pháp. Cho nên bản tâm của chúng ta không phải lúc nào nó cũng xấu, lúc nào nó cũng tức giận sân hận. Nó chỉ chợt đến chợt đi. Nó giống như là nước bẩn, nếu chúng ta gạn lọc thì nước sẽ được trong. Nước bản chất của nó là trong và sạch, nó không có bị dơ bẩn. Nhưng bất chợt nó bị dơ bẩn thôi. Cũng như hư không, nó vốn là trong xanh, nó không có bị vướng những cái mây mờ. Những cái mây mù đó nó chỉ chợt đến chợt đi, giống như nước dơ và những cái mây mù. Bản chất của tâm của mình, những cái tâm tiêu cực nó giống như là cái nước dơ và những cái mây mù. Còn bản tâm của chúng ta nó giống như là bản chất của nước trong sạch và cái hư không, nó không bị nhiễm ô. Cho nên khi giáo pháp Đức Phật chúng ta nói là không có một cái đấng sáng thế mà để ban ơn và giáng họa. Chúng ta không có chờ đợi ai cả, chúng ta phải tự thực hành để loại trừ tất cả những cái lỗi lầm nhiễm ô trong dòng thức của mình, và tôi luyện tâm mình những phẩm tính cao thượng để tâm mình phát triển toàn bộ những cái thiện đức. Cho nên cái đó là cái tư tưởng rất là đặc thù ở trong Phật giáo. Cho nên chúng ta muốn hạnh phúc đời này và đời sau, thì chúng ta phải đi trên cái con đường của giáo pháp Đức Phật và lắng nghe. Khi một lần lắng nghe như vậy, chúng ta càng gieo những cái hạt giống thiện lành sâu dày trong dòng tâm thức của mình. Cho nên với cái động cơ là gieo cái hạt giống sâu dày trong dòng tâm thức của mình để loại trừ tất cả những nhiễm ô, những lỗi lầm, để phát triển toàn bộ những phẩm tính cao đẹp của trong dòng tâm thức. Cho nên chúng ta lắng nghe bài pháp.
Ôi tanga tu đi cả số đấy, cái gì, ý kiến number xe vào rằng sinh mà tu xe đi xe sao đó, tao ông bên number xe vào ngã thế, rằng sinh mà tu xe đó, ý kiến number xe vào tao ông xe đó ý xe, mấy cái xe vào nãy xe vào nãy xe vào xe xe vào lưỡi xe vào tôi là ông xe vào đó, ông bố số tiền ba, số tiền cái mi wa na cha leo tu số đó ba. Mi se su ji ne tele su ti char ente ne pa sheba ti ji bi ora tele ha wang shi se ba ra wang bu su jian bei da kin se ra da kin se mi kin se de yu de le se ra da kin se de pe da sa pa ru de sheba ko ran pa ru de yang chi ora mi wa na wa chi wa de da kin se ba ra da bu de che so ba yu sheba de ke wang xia se ne me do de wo zo ye se de se ra 미화데 매나니 비까지 유네 통해 오마라 미로드 통면도 두루치 나게 왕부터 매나 암주 테디게 백마로 어디 왕부터를 수차오라 ombu들 차내니 시바데 소르겨라 미기 남신나는 시들 원시세 원시데 카두카둘이 유데 통화마도 통네 아니 야 가서래 유데 녀마도 저 시라 삼로 시라 고예요 말에 망셔데 원시 때는 아니 이시데 상당으로 뒤통송아서 아니 저 상당 잘했네 이시데 내가 조지라 삼로 단계 간가 이기시버터래 띵한주 삼로 단에 계절에 töso나 미기치 통소나 로아 네 르자라 소바테니오네 티치소네 삼로마부 고기래 대솔에 깨치 끼치스다 수기 깨치 수타티 수기 깨치 카도다 입디 통네니 텔레테네 왕볼이 차 텔레테네 메와데게 셰바케 네 남신다면다야 체용거라 체스네 개바들시거라 삼로마부 제로라 미기 통에 매 암적고에 매시라면 삼로 흉어라 시다치야 제가 말아 렘바르 시바 이기 시바데 대삼지 삼려 말아 어디인데 미기 계시 나외 수기 계시 대기 계시 뒤 계시 로이 계시 리체 계시 미기 계시 나외 계시 내 계시 제 계시 르기 계시 이기 계시서도 결례되는 시바데 기거라 자 이기 시바데 계시서래 ombe shebatu ko kadu thon da lenge ke soresh mado shira samluta yamara yiji shebade ne samluta mabu kodonga ge thado se dramda kanga yiji shebate gura oti inde namdi gazo so yiji shebade ta che gura oti ge samlukari tangdo samluta kya samluta ngdo mikyo samluta ngdo lomade samluta ngdo saura 미개와 삼을 땅에도는 다들 육시 먹어야 돼야 삼들고 도왔음 육사고야라 개와 삼을 거도 어디 야분도 삼들로 좀제 야부지도나 또 땅용래제 대도 다 뒤주 졸라마다 삼지야 개와 삼을 땅나 연된 현대 장나 지시야 삼을 땅으로 이게 쉐버데 백해 전부래 뒤순당 아주 뒤 배전나 것도 아주 준준할 수다 감성나 셈렌직 버생가면서 이 시바데 베시나요 그때 되게 참마치라 에드람밤 송게 코스고라 유고 섭네티 유고라 에드람밤 코란 시나게 찍고 말고 뱅보를 다가 샤샤네 때그마도 코코나 주용 말어 셈지라 미셈되게 봐 미마 무세고 삼 분마 무세고 삼사택도 셈렌지 버생가 마시도 자주 셈께나 셈기기도 딱베 셴지 자주 셈께나 셈기도 디지디한 셈들 자체쇼래 이신 돈데서면 차차로서 송도아 셈데 이신기 노브나 셔리스 야부 삼을다나 센델레 티기 송게 교치물 티기 송게 란다시 상말 템버시데 이기시버 삼을단 제토다 이신기 노브나 셔리스 셈데 이기시버데 저어디 테스거라 또 우지 삼을다네 그 강가데 냐와에다 ton도 제다 지된딜 쳔딜 야보메야 참마데 수수 셈디스거라 셈게 삼을다 쳔람담메다세 쳔멘다세 니 미기버서 람미기 셴미기 강가스고도 어디 디고 저데 셈드웨치도 사게 쳔송베송고도 디고체 암메차시 개와 부숨 소버세 랑게 셈네 요소드 덴디 산게 때베 산게 좀 덴디 벤 쳔송에 고바티 소라 산게 때발은 제고요나 메라도 강가 남바에는 산지 템바는 제고라 산지 템바 제고는 셈드에디 제고야라 셈디 만디세 라자테는 템바는 제스케요 말아 어디인데 이게 시버도 소소소소야 따도 제고를 쓴거도 소소 셈 수르지기 때문에 스럽지 셈 거라다지 다그 가르쳐도 다 하다 두자 삼롱 냠바 메일 삼코도 삼 갑조 마셔서 예적으로 봐 소소텔 갑조 삼을 도르지 코르소나 티레 삼테 삼을 단텔 갑조 전에네 도르 두자고 슈처처로라 셈데 삼을 두자지 밀네바체레 삼을 코도나 다그야 셈레 밀네바체 삼을 코르소나 삼 갑조 지기메라 육샤네는 코라 예로래 베란즈텔 갑조지 디 삼을 다 양자 삼을 다 양자 삼을 다 에네 코 도르라 미기비네 미기 살살로라 그 삼루라지네 양자 삼다 양자 삼다네 야호로와 어디인데 Yiji Shiba said, Kesabuin, some social symbol, social Dr. Some Dr. Yabo, Jason, and Lungani de Kevandura. Kanakaji said, Luigi Cholami, and some dinner Lunga Chuba and Dundur, Chuba Sambo, and a Miss Sambuchadora, Samba Sambuchadore. Oh, teachers on the Yatin do it. Titantang Sem Keva de Siguta, Tanta Dikar Sigurus, washing at the shake door. Each ship the Tal Shesara, he says, Tits order each shot. Washing us the Ombusu Chamber, Kaduka Tom, Mother, she does some Lutan and Dramada, some Korea over it. Oh, Tisia.
So here, where we are at in the text, this is we'll pick up at verse 104, which is refuting or sort of teaching the lack of inherent existence of the five sense consciousnesses. We've already established that the mental consciousness is not inherently established, and now we turn to those sense consciousnesses, as in those that arise from a physical sense power. So here, when it comes to the kind of material or substance of those, it's a special kind of form that acts as the kind of like governing condition or dominant condition for the arising of that consciousness. So there's also the object condition, right, that acts as a condition or a cause for that arising. But this is the dominant condition, as in, again, if we're lacking like the sense power, say you don't have that special sort of clear form for to be able to see, you're blind, and then you can't generate visual consciousness. Or if you are lacking that in terms of the auditory sense power, you're not able to generate that kind of a consciousness. And so here, these are referred to as like sense bases or sources because of the fact that it is on that basis then that we generate lots of different sort of thoughts and consciousnesses. They sort of proliferate after that. So here, when it comes to our mental consciousness versus those sense consciousnesses, it is really the mind, the mental consciousness that is most important, because that is the kind of mind that is having a thought that is either virtuous or non-virtuous or neutral. Sense consciousnesses are really just sort of perceiving the object in a kind of bare way. They aren't having these sorts of thoughts that come after them. And so here, as it is said in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, there's really nothing scarier in the three realms than the mind. So when we think about it, like we might think, oh, something like an atom bomb is really scary, but it's actually the mind of a being that would then wish to kill and deploy that atom bomb that is the really scary thing. Our mind is incredibly powerful, as in our mental consciousness. Like we have an incredible capacity for negative when you have the thought like to drop an atom bomb, but also for positive in terms of it is on the basis of the mind that we develop bodhicitta and those kinds of really powerful minds. And so our mind is kind of like a wish fulfilling jewel. All of the various sort of activities that we do with our speech and our body come after that. And it's also, again, so powerful in terms of what we are able to do, either for good or for bad. And it really depends upon our having an awareness of the mind. I mean, the Buddha taught the Dharma for the purpose of taming the mind. As it is said, do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So here, it's really meeting, like whether we meet with the teachings or not, is not as important as whether we understand that it's our mind that we have to work with. And so really, this is about gaining awareness of our mind, watching our mind, not sort of supporting. When we see our mind is inclined towards something negative, not backing that up, but rather trying to throw it away and put our mind to something virtuous. And when we have a virtuous thought, trying to foster that, think of it again and again. I mean, our mind is so important. Our conduct of speech and body follows after this, and we can really influence those by taking control over our mind. So we can see the way way that this works. If we have a negative kind of a thought and we begin backing that up, supporting it will just get stronger and stronger and stronger. And so we have to gain the kind of awareness that this is not how we want our mind to go. We need to correct that and try to bring it towards something virtuous. And so recognizing the primacy of our mental consciousness and just how important it is to gain some kind of control over this, to subdue it in some ways. Really, there's no other means for peace than this. And this is the essence of the Buddha Dharma. Our purpose in meeting the Dharma or listening to it at all is for being able to tame our mind. So we should recognize the importance of this. And here we have in the text, we previously went through the kind of signs or reasons establishing the lack of inherent existence of the mental consciousness. But now we are going to turn to this verse dealing with the lack of inherent existence of the five sense consciousnesses, which again are not as important in that they just sort of perceive the objects, but it's the mind that then engages in all kinds of thoughts about them, labeling, thinking this and that, and going to virtuous and non-virtuous sort of places. And so that is what we need to be most aware of.
Khảo sát cái dòng tâm thức của mình từ nơi cái thân và cái tâm nó tùy thuộc vào tâm của mình. Nếu tâm chúng ta nghĩ điều thiện thì đương nhiên sẽ thể hiện ra cái hành động trên thân và miệng sẽ nói những điều thiện lành. Nếu chúng ta nghĩ những điều xấu ác thì tâm của chúng ta sẽ thể hiện những điều xấu ác và thân và miệng. Nên ở đây nói bài hôm qua đã nói về ý thức. Ý thức là quan trọng nhất, nó có thể điều động toàn bộ 5 cái thức đầu và cả thân và miệng. Còn 5 cái tiền ngũ thức là nhãn thức, nhĩ thức, tỷ thức, thiệt thức, thân thức thì nó ở đây nói là nó giống như một cái chiếc gương để phản chiếu làm môi giới thôi. Nên ở đây chúng ta đang nói về nó không có từ tính của 5 cái căn thức.
남신가 랑시지 매버템 바스도 남신가 원부시바 같소다 미그 넘버시로 나웨 넘버시로 네 넘버시로 치 넘버시로 류지 넘버시로 이지 넘버시로 달시사라 어야 어떤 데서 참마데 마음부치 트와티네 덴데요 마디 이르벤데르베서 마음부치 치시기도 테 랑외네 투바 랑신지 투바 랑게 모여 투바세 대와 동에 수타티로 제 가리에나요 Kurang ngoyo tsu tukuyo na sigwara, rangi ngoyo tukuyo na, rawa du tukuyo na, kurang rawa chini yokuyo na se, rwa, rangshin ji, kurang ki rangshin tsu yoya chi yo na se, rwa, ye tak soba, che soba se, tak che chini raya chi, diri sha si se chi yo na se, o ti tun tamba yo na, tinte yo kura, ti che ki yora, ane diri ben, tinte yo ben se, ku sha se ra yo mara, ane ta rangwe ne mi du sum, 다 매르스 매바 마르스 차셰마 부치바 테솔 테나 르파 치지 레스 파타요라 다 테섬을 샤고레스 와레 똑베 따섬 타녀게 왕기 샤섬 유코라 라왕기 두고 마레 쿠랑기 로파 차셰마 부요리 테스다 네 르왕제 어 텐진 데버주와 takshima mbula tenchi, tetan trene, ni lopa taani, ta di miri, di tari, di tsoa, tewa nyosu, tungi nyosu. Ta tewa kagirisi, chaygandu ni chik diri shasi, dugu tsusa chi yo maare. Yo yore, me urvasna, me maare. Tene taba samki yobe kochi wara. Tenchi dribar juwa samdu ku tewa nyongu yore, tungi nyongu yore, chi nyongdegi chi yore to. Sa tsoa ni me usen digi yo maare, tongba nyi se. Chi tongdo namgyu nganzu samlo tanga nashi, nao nashi, soso ina dra shenda kanga yo mara. Soso ina rawa chi samlo togre, yido nga ina medra, yido mewa da trata nye da, kanga medra tongre. Yu korang ngune chigi besore tonga yora, rawa chi nye besore tongre. Ti yo mara sigora. Tembar mera mara zu tonga nashi tembar yo mara, tongzu ti tembar mara sigora. 다 라마도 주변에 얘네 딱지 주고 주세 거라네 데르웬데 말에 다 면도 와서는 다 때네 딱 벗으면 샤워해서 딱시 차실을 때는 르파 따네 땡진 데르바죠 땡진 대단전에 lö파다네 디미리스로 고나기도 너 다나기도 세 코나기도 세 다가차를 따고 간데스나기도 디디 라고 말했었는데 지나기나 디나기오라 디 코르베세 요마라 가사데르베스는 말하지 어쩐데 전에 그 라야 요마라 근데 삼을다는 동바 삼을다는 랑원에 여기다 현자도 충도라 랑원도 여기 삼을고 근데 대화다 동에도 랑원도 여기 삼을고 될 때는 세바기 와라 대화 조선은 어디 야고도 거기 삼사체 사과도 세바기 와라 동해에 조선은 어디 거기면도 삼 동해다 제어를 세바기 거기 세바용 와라 동해 조선은 어디 거기면도 삼በት 제어를 세바시라 너희는 어디 매참 어디 단다 거기에서 사과도 세바되 와 세바연에 들는 바치게다 지탄팀들이 너 건도용 거라 대샤 건도용 거라 대녀 뭐 강가 현다 용 거라 어디 됐어요 땅게 왔다 뒤에서 두대 왕게로 두다마도 랑외네 랑신지 랑게고요 세거라 치료바요라 남베 두다마고 마시그라 어디 엄마바데 랑외네 두가 매번 마와도 현다 강가 랑외네 요새 뭐 가래나 코랑외네 요 그래서 하더라 되게 제주 땅게 와라 동바시가 동방에서 시가라 야 뒤지소나 근데
So here again in this teaching of the five sense consciousnesses as not being inherently existent, and again we have our visual or like our eye sense, our eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and it appears to us not only that those consciousnesses exist from their own side, but the objects that they take. Like, so they're various objects, and then the pleasure or pain that we experience on that basis, they appear as though they are existent from their own side, that they have this kind of like autonomous existence, inherent existence, like that we could find something if we were to sort of search for it. There would be something that would be able to bear that analysis, that we could point to and say, oh yeah, this is it. It could bear scrutiny. But they aren't existent in that way. They don't exist in the way that they appear to us as like that, as existent in and of themselves from their own side. But are they then entirely non-existent? Well, no, it's that they are merely dependently designated, and that's what we have to posit. That's sort of what is left over. So the object is not existent from its own side with that kind of independent or autonomous existence, but rather independence upon a collection of causes and conditions, a collection of parts. The mind dependently designates, oh, it is this or it is that, but it is merely dependently designated, and such is sufficient for existence. So here, when it comes to, again, we're talking and describing emptiness, and we have to have the emptiness of something, right? There are things that appear to us, and while they don't exist in the way that they appear, it's not like there's utter non-existence, but rather we have to posit that things are merely dependently designated. So like if your head hurts, then we say, you could say like, oh, you're sick, right? But it's not as though the head is the person. We are aware of that, but yet when we are speaking conventionally, we can those suffice for our sort of conventions and existence. So here, if you think that, say, happiness and suffering, those the objects that produce them as well as the feelings that come out of them are really truly existent, then you're going to crave them. We think like, oh, I want that thing that's good, or I want to be separated from that thing that I think is harmful, that I think is suffering. And based upon that kind of craving and attachment, then there will be hostility, animosity when something gets in your way of having that, or when someone tries to prevent you from that. And so all of the other various afflictions will arise. And so here, the middle way school, the Madhyamikas, are unique among the various tenets schools in saying that phenomena aren't really existent or objectively existent. For all of the schools below, they would say that for something to be existent, it must exist from its own side, have that kind of objective existence. But for the Madhyamakas, they would say that no, no phenomena has that kind of autonomous, independent existence, objective existence, inherent existence from its own side. Rather, all phenomena are merely dependently designated. And so therefore, we shouldn't have the kind of craving, wanting to grasp at these things as if they really existed in that way. So here again, we have arrived at, I believe it will be beginning with verse 104.
남시 nga shiki meba tempane esedwa tiri namshi nga de ombu nabar shiba nga de da chitan namshi tsotu ba shecha le ngar she yu na se shecha sne yu de sora suche mishi de bchera ne shecha su de matu ko ne miki de matu be ngone sheba de yu na se ti yo marwa su matu be ngone sunzi mishi yungu marwa Tade matube ngone transinya she ugumarwa timena tingone transinam she ugumarwa suta tiro reja to ngole ye ti wangbole char ani shine sheba kegura suta tiro reja to migirwa mishigi kyurwa nashigi kyurwa suti mishigi kyurwa sa suti ngele che yude ngele che yujendi chisu kegura kude ngole yogura debu chisu yogura 어디 딱지 시거라 내가 수고했네 시자스도 미긴들 시거라 속다 때로를 장하고들 시거라 시자 레가르 시유나세 속다 때로를 장이 나보디 뭐래 시거라 디 마제베 뭐리야 네 시바 미시나 시제시 루시디 유나소라 소지 미시 단진예시 단진나시 룬지지시디 유나시거라 유나 네 테니치레 미네키스 네 소지 미시디 Karil tani kevrese, su tanda trubyo marwa, mishi kona ngoli yona, su madruwa ngone mishi ora. Ini sunzi mishi de karil mikin chani kevrese, ko mikin yo marwa, yudi mena, ti zimbe shiba ke yo marwa. Oche ta, ti yonsik marwa, yine takshe chigi ora, ti mara tinresi ora. Shicha, suta tigro recha ngabuti, mikin ngabuti, ngone sunzi mishi transi nyeshi tuzu yona sigora ane sheba tuzu mikin karil tani kivare sura yu karil tani kivare kivya yo marwa ti sigora ane shedan shecha lenji nasa yana su dedan sunzi mishi ngide lenji tunyamdu kena sigora shecha su dedan sunzi mishi ngibuti lenji du kena nyamdo sali tuchi du kena sigora ane ko kyudan drebu regi marwa, kyudan ngele drebu di chisu chukurwa. Yu su de dan sunzi mishi ni tunyamdo kena, sunzi mishi di sulu teni keba marwa, karil teni keba resi gora. Teni kara. Sheda shecha len chik na, teni chikla mini, karila mini kikiresi, chikla mini kesi. 미kinchi korwa, shiba kyo yuji korwa. Wende shecha le chi yu na se, wende shecha chi yu na, shecha degi chi su, shiba di yu na su te yorwa namgyo. Tambu su di tu, ane sunzi mishi tu kurwa, ta tu, ta di wombol chati ni transi nyeshi tu kurwa, di chitan yore. Di na rangshin ki tuba chiki yu na, ti yuwa di tegi yu maris kag yora. wende shecha chi yu na, shecha sutta tero recha ke chi su, che la si gora. Ane mixi na sunzi mixi transi nyashi transi ne ronzi chi shi tuzu yu na su, ti yora nam junga zu, kyudi nge li che, ti miwa la cha, ane sheba ke gora. Tezi sheba kaan le ke se, ti sheba kaan le ke di kewa teg ma re se, ta nam ju kewa teg re te, rangu ne trube su ki kewa ina ti teg ma re se gora. Tanti ma odi lo shandira. Shecha yu le se, shecha yu le ngar se de ngondu se gora, wangshi ngabu de yu na se gora, ne wangshi ngabu de chile mini kiri, miki karili mini kigres, titu marwa. Kiti miki ngondo masunga chi, miki yo marwa, yu sukta tu recha ngati mena, mishinda shi kia yo marwa. Kia yo marwa. Shetan shecha tu lenchi tu yo nasu, shecha su te tang sunzi mishin jibute tunyam tu yo nasu ora. Tunyam tu yo na chiki chiki kyu chiya yo marwa. Kyu sete nge ngondo yo, ane tegi ya jibute kia ora. Su te nge ngondo yo, ane miwa le shar, ane tene yi ki stila chola, yi te. Su se, miki se ra, tagen se, tema tagen se sumi ugara da. Chida, miki se tu yu derwa, tagen se tu miwa derwa. Tema tagen se tu yi de, yi ki sheba de, nga zu yi shi chi yuwa, te chola yi te gore. Ko to na ma che ne tong ma ra me de sem ra chi yin je de na mi da de ne mi lu te su cha de sheba chi ma re mi ji yo re mi wa su de cha de ko shen da ji le sam ra shu chen ba da de na ti tong ma re ti tong ge ma re yi de ti chol to na de ora ke je re she na ti chol to na de ora o sa pa te ne tra de che na yo bu che ko re ko be sam shen da ji le shu je ta de ne tra chang chung ko ma re Shanda Samhagwar to yi the Shanchol Ying de Yona, Tichol man and the Yudi Sotoma, Tematakis, Miki, Taki, Tematakis, King Sung the Sasonane, Sansona, the Mixi Nashi Chishi to Sikigara. Oh, this Yora. Tunyam do you like Maresera? That Miki didn't want to you, Nisheva de Chisikeva or Tikevora. Diana Ramoni to be Yonati. Take Maris order. Chita Tindere, Kera Rawado to be Siki, any making the nail teaches or any Mishika or the take Maris order. That is what is it. Kena Commandos, what did I? Till Henji do Kena wash it in a chilamine kitty. Wash it Kena, Roa, and Miki, what's this one? 어디라 미팅 원도 마소에 실세 시다 시자 둘 해지도 깨나서라 두냠도 연나서도 와시드니 찔라미네 깨데 와시 마게나 아니 미기 마게 요 마게베 깨면서 미기 깨나 다 두냠로와 두냠도 연나네 거 직실이야 그단 제빈 남샤 요구 말아 미기 깨나 Washi Kessin be making the washing you the Tunyam to Yunani, the making the washing the Kuchik Mara, Kuse de Gondokora, Jebu de Gondo Kudi Yuni, take it Kekora, Tunyam to Yuna, can they take Maris at Yundua? Casera. Tinase, Washi Kessin be Kishi to Government, so the Washi Kekwama, Kokejero, Kora, you the Kesares or. When they wash Sheja Chiuna, one be Sheba the Sheja Su, the Chisu Kevina, Tikevora, Tamu Su to Miwana Char, and it Tematagasa, and Mishishine Kevora. Teach it not take it. Then the Ramuni Trubetsuki Kevina into Maresura. When they Mishi Sheja Chiuna, Tate one be Sheba, Ken Kale. Rangshin ki kede se, rangshin ki drubesu ki kede kyo tek mares ora. Karesana, kechi ngama shikbale kena, ta kechi ngama de su de shiksane ki yorda, su de shiksane sumzi mishi ki yorda, su de mashi kone ki yorda, tende takse chera. Tende takse, rangwene druba mayene tende takse shekmo, tende takse shangi yo mares. Tene tapasan kivare sirmado, tinde sene komare se, tene tapasedala, tauten sene rakomare. Di kambarisne kambe koda kegunstanti, sokare se tasunti, that's all. Sokare se on it, tene tapa, jide tange tasaro, but the kambare so the shangazus get shagores, taganti mado, the kagre se yomare, sene me kubore shivsigra, jide tangele. Tanya something you are, Madonna you are. 다 더 담바리요나네 데레스 주주 세치고라 데세치고라 어디 원시 치유나 데세 원시 개간래 정신기 개데 밑에베시 정신기와 밑에데 개징아마 식발리게 따다지고라 개징아마 수디 식사네 미시리 기거다 마시고네시고라 식사네 개나 사벼르지네 규사벼데 식사네 사벼르사네 이네 단다 요구께 터고라 베시고라 그래서 원베시베 개 간래자 개와 밑에베시 개지 아마 식발레 개나 ane sabi sikbale jan yogu kiwan kos ngama mashikbale jan kenase sabi kudi mashikbale tene debu namshidi kiyu nase ora mashikbale kenase ane kore so tambo tana ngoso ale tanya de tuso shikbale kena sabi sikbale jan yogu kiwan yogu resa sudi mashikbale kiyu nane केना मैंने तू शेंगे से पादो छे माशुनी ले ता तुजु से पादो छे ने किरे पादो माशुनी किरे सोरा पादो छे वाले किरे से ना तंबो ताना ngöso क्यों मैं पादो छे ना ngöso क्यों थे मारे मुझे सेरा ngöso कैसे क्यों तू तेमाता तो जेबु कैसे ना ngöso कैसे रा क्यों ने कैसे तो क्यों के तेरे जेबु के ते चेमा से कैसे ना क्यों ने के बसेरा 무유주다 규주세라 교련이 요라 무엇을 거두다 남사께 게들 무유주세라 규주스도 대 규대세 대 요로 가진세 제마께서나 들레 규베 되고서라 규들레 규규 진대우디 규내기 거라 바도 마셔보세 때마다도 깨베는 건데시라 건데 규데 다 메시드 담보다나 무엇을 겨와 메시바 요래세 치마다나 땅이 탐제도 마치베 버르르 tomba 매어서 깨르스나 수다 시바니부테 아니 수다 시바니부테 차 탐제 찍으려고 그래서 그라 치마다나 등이 탐제도 마시바나 뒤치도 제번 줄았어 수들이야 미시들은 제베 차제 요르 만데베 차제 요르스나 아니 때때네 딱 봤으면 그래서 랑원에 두어를 말해서 그래
Okay.
그래서 대번 줄았어 최마주니 요나 템바투바 냠베 데메도 투보세 가다 주두된데 또 너를 락샤네 야 샨다도 칼레케면 도와 등념도 계세데 되도와 아니 유디 치수께 시베댕에 계세는 들리긴데 요 말아 다시 시베 유디 치수께 그랬으나 대랑원에 두발이야 아니 치수께부터 대고 말해서 뜻뜻인도와 야
Okay, so here, then finally getting to the verse 104, it says, if awareness exists prior to the object of awareness, perceiving what does it arise? So here, it's not logical or tenable for the awareness, the consciousness to exist prior to the object of its awareness. So again, the cause of consciousness, one of the causes, we'll get to the three that are necessary, is then the object condition, right? And so when we talk about the consciousness being generated on the basis of, say, an object condition. You perceive an object, and that object gives rise to a consciousness. The cause has to come before the result, right? So for each of the six consciousnesses, like in the absence of a form, we can't have a visual consciousness perceiving form. So the form has to be existent before that consciousness that perceives it, or our auditory consciousness. We can't be like perceiving a a sound prior to the sound. This is not, as it comes in the first part of this verse, that it's not possible for the awareness, the consciousness, and here we're just talking about the five sense consciousnesses, although of course there are six with the mental consciousness. But those don't, they can't precede their object of knowledge, right? That needs to be something that acts as a cause or something that comes before. But it's also not the case that the consciousness and the object of that consciousness could be simultaneous, because then again, it's not possible for there to be a relationship of cause and effect. On what basis would that consciousness arise? Because its cause hasn't yet come, or that cause being existent at the same time as the result, the consciousness perceiving it, wouldn't have any efficacy to give rise to the consciousness, right? So here, it's not possible to posit them as being simultaneous, because again, if you are having one act as the cause for another, it has to be, it has to precede that. So here, generally, we can say that yes, the object has to come before what it gives rise to. But if you are asserting, as the opponent does, that this happens in a kind of inherent way, then here it's not sort of a viable or suitable for there to be that kind of production, inherent production. Because again, if we are asserting such sort of inherent production of something, like the thing you have. So here, again, the object has to come before. In general, we would say that there are, when it comes to consciousness, there are three sort of causes of that. We have first the sort of object condition, as in the object that will be perceived by that consciousness. There is the dominant condition, as in the physical sort of sense power on the basis of which will give rise to a consciousness. And then there is the immediately preceding condition, which actually has to do with the mental consciousness, in the sense that this is what aims the mind at a particular object. That if so again, if like someone, the mental consciousness needs to turn that particular sense consciousness toward an object. Otherwise, like if you're very distracted, someone might be talking over here, but you're not going to be able to pick up on that because the mind hasn't put the attention on it. So here, again, when we, although we would say that in general, the kind of object condition, as in the object that is going to be perceived by that consciousness, has to precede it. It doesn't do so in an inherently existent way, but rather, so we can say that, of course, the consciousness can't come before its object. We can eliminate that one. But if they're simultaneous, again, there couldn't be a causal relationship, because there's no way for something to be a cause if it exists at the same time as its result. Rather, a cause has to precede the result. And so there's no way that they can be simultaneous and act in that way as cause and result. But so then the next sort of question that arises is, okay, well, if you want to say that the the object condition precedes the consciousness that it gives rise to in this inherently existent way, as if they had sort of their, again, autonomously or ultimately existent, you need to be able to find them, to locate them. Like, again, inherent existence entails that not only that you're saying something exists, but it exists in this way wherein it could stand up to scrutiny or analysis. You can point to, well, this is the thing. So then the question would arise, well, okay, does the cause cease before then the result is generated? And if that were the case, then you would would have to say, well, so a seed could be destroyed and then it produces a sprout. That doesn't make sense because then like a burnt seed would be able to produce a sprout. And if you were to say, well, there's sort of like an overlap in time, there's a point in time where they are sort of simultaneous. The seed is still existing and the sprout is existing. That's sort of not possible because then again, you wouldn't be able to posit clearly a sort of approximate cause and then a sort of kind of long-term cause. There would be another logical fallacy that would incur if you were to say that that is the way that they are generated, is in such a way where they almost mix at a single time, because they would then be sort of become mixed in time. So here, it's not viable to say that the object condition is destroyed before then it gives rise to the resulting consciousness, but nor can we say that it remains and is sort of, there's a time in which they overlap. That's also not a logical kind of a proposition. And this is only in the case that we are asserting some kind of inherent production, right? When we talk about production as being something that isn't ultimately existent, but merely dependently designated, then we don't have to find that thing, right? Like if we are to say, oh, there's a house here, like it's something that is designated upon all of these various collections. But if you were to tell someone, well, find the house, I mean, there's nothing more that we can't point to anything within the various parts, the walls, the windows. You can search through all of those exhaustively and not find something that you can point to and say, this is it. But we would be stupid to say that, well, the house doesn't exist. Of course, the house exists. It's just something that is a mere dependent designation. So here we can't again, assert either that the consciousness comes somehow before its object, the object that it perceives. That's not logical. They have to act in a causal way. And so too, if you're to assert that they're simultaneous, like if they're existing at the same time, you can't posit that there is that object condition that then gives rise to a consciousness. The cause has to come before the result. But even if you are to try to assert that, if you do so in a way where, yes, the object condition comes before the consciousness realizing that object, but try to assert that it does so in an inherently existent way, then there are the logical fallacies that would incur if there's either sort of a space between those, as in the cause has completely stopped, and then it gives rise to that result. There would be a problem there, but also if you are to say that there's this overlap. So here, what is being asserted is that in either of those cases, whether you say that there's sort of a space between or not, true existence is degenerated, as in you are no longer able to assert true existence in either case, and therefore have to assert that these are merely dependently designated as such. So here, this then goes into, I didn't read it yet, 105, the first half of 105, wherein it says, moreover, were it to occur after its object, whence would awareness truly arise? So really there's these three, just trying to kind of get a summary of this because we went through a lot in this section, that the awareness can't be prior to its object, nor can there be simultaneity, nor can there be a truly existent relationship of cause and effect. It's a little bit easier if he does each one individually, but you know.
Karilitan Tigris, and if you get Mukodi Madekane, Dramada Trumke Kanga Tonsonene, Consipesha Tremo, Karilitan Keres, Tike Mera, Tunyamdo Keres, and Tunyamdo Kena, couldn't every Marwa. Piggy para that Tunyamdo Dine Yakina, Dumara, Piggy par, Titsu Charm, Yalta, and Shine Shibeki Kegora. Tunyamdo Kevala Tunde Yomare, 규세대 놀래게 제부디 치스기오라 되래 다 담아대 되래와 담분 수디게 되네 셰바디게 그래서 뒤기고라면서 담분 되게 된 거라 대사서는 뒤매월 자네 미시기라 뒤디요래 타이난 되래야 대전에 바르도 맞춰버체네 기그래라 바르도 쳐네 기그래서도 바르도 맞춰버체네 기에나 아니 배 제조기를 차려 찍도록 바르도 쳐배나네 대 바르도 쳐바다 맞춰배 차로니 미기데다 대니 용거를 때나 라문에 주배 랑신지 주배 기와 태고 말했어도 된다 레라전에 때려 가스라 담바 미기데 때네 드부데 게이나 군이 준 들어 뭐 다데르바 제메 차그래 랑신지 주배 드부이나 줄을 떼고 말해 랑신단에 주메다 샹라 떼바 메베셔라 제부데 랑신지 계속 코나 랑문에 깨어라 네 교가르치도 야려 말아 코나 태운 거라 랑문에 깨운 거라 코나 랑신지 깨운 거라 걔네 줄을 떼고 말했어라 디라 랑문에 깨 교단 제부 가가니네 저와요 말 군이 교디 코나 랑문에 주비와데 제부데 코나 랑문에 주와래 랑신지 깨고래 교텔 때네 아니 제부데 깨고도나 저마로 코랑와체네 깨고 말어 수년제제 명왕의 차를 이때 안에 약게인데 교단 깨를 때는 거야 시바랑한테 깨시거라 근데 랑신기 깨요 말을 생기 왕기 죽기거라 교단 깨기 왕전에 깨거라 사변을 때문에 누구야 깨서나야 사다 주단 매도 롱다 뜻이 되거라 랑신기야 랑매버 약게 죽어라 교단 깨야 초선에 야타요거라 코라 랑신기 야타요 말아 랑은에 끼고는 교단 깨도 내가 저거 말아 코라랑이 코란 깨운 거네 어디시오라 어떤 데 그래 디소션 되서
So here, to think about, again, these three sort of different propositions that are being refuted. The first is, if awareness exists prior to the object of awareness, perceiving what does it arise? So here, if we were to put it in a very simple way, I mean, you have to have the thing that you're seeing prior to seeing it. Like if people are going to go out and pay money to see a movie, but the movie is not actually there yet, it's like, how are they going to have the consciousness of that? Unless they're just sort of conjuring up images in their heads. And then in that case, why are they paying money for anything? They could just conjure up images in their head. They don't need to go anywhere. But then if we are to assert that like say a visual consciousness, the form and the visual consciousness are simultaneous, well, then there's no causality. We can't assert causality for things that are existing or coming into existence at the same time. So here, in general, we can say that, yes, form and like the object, the sort of object condition precedes the consciousness that perceives it. But it's not as though this happens in an inherently or truly existent way. There is this no kind of objective production. So here, when it comes to, yes, in general, we would say that like for a visual consciousness perceiving form, the form precedes that visual consciousness, but not in an inherent objective sort of a way. Because once we assert that kind of objective existence, inherent existence, well, if the result exists inherently, exists in and of itself, then it's not dependent upon anything else. It becomes impossible for it to have the kind of relation with a cause, to be dependent upon a cause for its coming into existence. Rather, it exists in and of itself. It has that kind of autonomy or inherent, intrinsic existence that isn't going to depend upon anything else. So we can see, though, that the arising of a consciousness, like say a visual consciousness perceiving form, is dependent upon the coming together of many different causes and conditions. We have to have that kind of objective condition of an object that's being perceived. We have to have the immediately preceding condition, our mind, our mental consciousness turning toward that particular object. And we have to have a proper dominant condition, as in a working sense power, visual sense power, in order for that to happen. And And so too, I mean, this is like anything. And we can say that a seed that's planted in a field, it's not just a single cause, but many causes and conditions come together for that seed to bring about a sprout and then a harvest. And so too, when we think about the way in which our sense consciousnesses arise, it isn't in an inherent kind of a way, but rather is merely something that comes about due to the aggregation of various conditions that bring about that consciousness. So here, those are the three sorts of relations between the object and the consciousness for sense consciousness that are being refuted here. And that, again, that last one, although generally, yes, the object needs to precede the consciousness, it doesn't do so. They don't exist in this inherent way or have this kind of ultimate production, which would have certain logical fallacies of, well, is there a space between these two? And if they're two inherently existent things, then there could be no relation between them. But if there's somehow some sort of overlap, they kind of mix and become one at one point, that's also not viable within this kind of logic. So here, this is what is being refuted there.
Ngarsheba Talia Mabushesan, Shona Tamjeki Kewati, Rangshinji Truba, Eva Topa, you are my answer, Rangshinji Trube, Kewa Yo Marisota, Peter Chona Tamjeki, Kewa Topa, you my answer. Rangshinji Trube, Topa, Kewa Kua, my Edesa. Papa Lodru Meseben, Donalia, Lodru Meseben Donal Sonshas, Duce and Dumaji, Tube Church, some the Rangshinji. Matruba Topper Chaos. Don't do Jay and don't do much in a Chutam Jet. The Rangshinji Truba, Rangshinji Trube Tomba, Rangwene Trube Tomba, Rawan to Trube Tomba, oh, the Tonani, Chutampanisha Combarcha also to us, yeah.
So then next, in the second half of verse 105, we turn to meditation on the close placement of mindfulness of phenomena. And so here, as we've already gone through the mindfulness of body, feelings, and mind, now it says, in such a way, the generation of all phenomena is not realized, or we realize that all phenomena are not inherently generated. So thus the intrinsic arising of all things is not ascertained. So here, as has been explained above, and many sort of logic reasons have been put forth, all inherently established production is not observed or is not realized. This is because it doesn't exist as such. And so as it is explained in the sutra requested by, and he sometimes referred to as inexhaustible intelligence, it says that it is taught that one should understand that all phenomena, both compounded and uncompounded, are not established inherently, that don't have that kind of intrinsic existence. So here we should recognize all phenomena as being empty of objective existence, inherent existence, existence from their own side.
Making the Namsheta, Unibuti, Tunyamdu Kigareta, Mishing Edge, Yuchis Kigareta, Tikasra, making any cheese to Tigres, a touch and a castle, or take out the dreamer sons or down over to Dukeling to Siora, over and change it to a Kelly. Take it on the Hajantawa Dosere. Hajantawa can do the Sana. Tambo Hajantawa. Sabatsu nete ba lencha biora. Oh, kete tedar kunzu me se. Kete tedar kunzu me. Ne tele teni kala yose. Ta kera kunzu de shato me do sere. Kera sheba na shi chena kandere sena. Kete ngaro yu chen ni bute. Yu dingeli yore da yu chen dingeli yore se ne ta che tabasum chen ka sa se. Tunyam do yore da yu chen dingeli che yore da 야 유대 게트네 유전디 어르베스인데 딱바숨 전에 가서세 대가에는 결혼 군주 켈리에 대해 지벌에 샤세거라 하장 타와 보고도 간데르스나 되네 대등하루 유전가 질렀다네 유다 유전이부터 두냠도 기그레 당가시 기그레 당간데 줄서 가서 라루게 네 랑게 천이지 랑게 천이지 주바 까바테다나스 랑게 천이지 주베 유전 요 말에서 여나네 간데스 깨르세 계란 따바숨 전에 가서 하세라 대단한 군주도 주반데 바라 계란 군주 덴바스 군주치 켈링도 덴바트바 요 말에 쯤바트바 요 아레세 켈링도 하세라 아니 대단 되바나 견디 총신 계란 군주치야 돼 켈링도 될래지 버려서 와라 총신 랑게 천이지 주바 미세나 최 가야 샤서메베 랑게 천이지 주고로 코나 랑게 주고로 코나 랑원에 깨버려서 와라 대마전에 최 가야 샤토고 말해서 땅거부 텐두 켈링게 주시고 와라 최 가야 샤서메베 군주 매버 요로센다 군주 태그 말해서 계란 군주 대 샤토고 말해서 랑게 천이 매나 최고라 랑게 천이 샤에 매나 샹달로 뜨지 되는 장자 샤고 있나 소소 천이 랑게 천이 랑원에 매나 쓰고라 되니 템바니 샤토고 말해 군주 템바 매나 돈담베 템바 텔레케요 토마로 군주 매번 주신 텔레 되니 갈이 군주 매번 도도 쓰고라 마카 야, 다들. 대전에 군주 매반도 도시라. 군주 매반 주시. 텔라 테니까 군주 매나 돈다 뱉는 오마로. 테니까 니가 매도 템바니가 매바 차거든. 라루 템바니 샤라 군주지 템바다 돈다 뱉는 버스니 샤라. 어다케나 군주디 샤토고 말해서 와래. 샤마도나 돈다 뱉는 바데 오래 템바니 매바 차도 와서 와라. 텔라 템바니 칼라 유데 테니가 매라세. केते सुटला सोबा कुंजु बा रंग छनी जे टुबर शेंबे ngor tembar yoba yenji se yu rang ngone tembar meba कुंजु do yoba kyeje kelang ba yilas te kera ne ti ka sura कुंजु be chudu sama rang छनी ji tuba rang छनी ji tuba shembe lo ngol ya rang chenji tuwa yoades lomba samre tenzengi ngaranzu namju lo lenji tenzengi ne rangune yoba tembar yoba lomba samre modo tengone le tende yo mare se so ase tene tera kera kunzu de te chibare do se te kunzu de mena lo lomba samado merwas te mena ani tanda be temba yung mare temba ni namshati meban jo ku do haja tawa pa ko do kunzu meban jo las this one ayo ka sare 얘기 유랑경원에 템번 매버 군주도야 교제 켈랑바일 군주도 여바 교제 켈랑바데 어디에 태그만 도스라 야다 군주 템버 태그 말해서 디멘 던담 템버 태그 말해 결혼 템번이 남사 태그만 도스거라 던담 베템버서데 동반이들 쓰거라 군주 템버서는 동반이 쉬시 캐시서라 소트라테 로레제 쳐도 강가 군주 템바라 티랑원에 동바세데 던담 템바세거라 오야 티텍 말해서 거래야 이리도
So then we turn to the next section, which is dealing with abandoning debates about the two truths not being viable. And so here, the first section then deals with sort of getting rid of absurd consequences that the sort of realists, we could say, or those who assert true existence or that true existence is necessary, they sort of are hurling this or saying that this isn't the way that the Madhyamakas are positing the conventional isn't proper. Or so here it then says if that is so, if it is the case like we've described above, that phenomena are merely dependently designated, then they say then conventional truth does not exist. So how could there be both truths, or how could there be two truths? And so here, they would say that again, if you have refuted all of these sorts of ways of the sort of relationship between the object and the consciousness that perceives it and so forth, you would end up refuting conventional truth as well. That if, as again, and these are the realists and so forth, if you refute there being some kind of existence by means of its own characteristics, and you then want to posit that there's some sort of conventional existence, then because that kind of establishment by means of its own characteristics isn't possible, then you couldn't posit any phenomena whatsoever, as in conventional truth would become non-existent. And so therefore these, and this is the opponent, we could say, or the non-madhyamakas, those who assert that for phenomena to be existent, they have to have some kind of true existence, or existence by means of their own characteristics. They say that the kind of refutation that has been done above by the Madhyamikas would lead to there being no way to posit any phenomena whatsoever. And so therefore the conventional too would become non-existent. And if the conventional doesn't exist, then how could you posit the ultimate? So basically they are accusing the Madhyamikas of their undermining the presentation of the two truths entirely. They say that there has to be existence by means of its own characteristics, or from its own side, because if you don't assert that, then this basically means that like all of these conventional phenomena of forms and sounds and so forth, I mean, they appear to our mind as though they are established by means of their own characteristics. And so if you're saying that really that's all just deluded, there is no such existence, they're utterly non-existent, then as there is no truth, you can't, you would have to assert that conventional truth is merely a delusion.
kunzu sede lo shenji kirachena kunzu kawa bumba suda tiru rechala soba khoa se tazu sama lo pa lomba sama to ngonen mengere to asegara uma bal su tsabe kya ta ngabum tendu ma wato so ro kunzu de ne lo shenji pa lomba sama to chege yu ngone koran bindu asegara te ne kirane simjen de nyangelen de be tobe che de kiran tongbani she chi she de do te shebel ko ba yo mare sugara tabra tongge kora yo mo do asa gurwa lo shengi lomba samma do me do asa pena de peti chani she do takbal tu tu to asa to jaga ine tu ma bu yo to tu so jang ma bu yo ra o ti kar sura sarabe ru be chili na ime ko memba che sarabe ru be sela ma se chuna takba thata si tu sha sha yo na 아니 메디 오데 투투도 삼고 시그라 텔레바 투투 롬바 삼레 마토 투투 ngo네 요 마르바 오테나 시레 도와서 버다 계란테 쳐샤야 가가 레바 롬바 삼마도 제게 ngo네 예코랑 ngo네 치 둔네 때시면도 와서 가라 오테나 다데 카르소라 대야 군습 현기나 군습 대야 로 현기 바 롬바 삼치레 도와서 तेने कुछ दे मेहर वासने समझे दूंगे जे ना रोता थारबा थोबा तो कोया में दो आसे समझे न्यांगे कालदास ओ ते न्यांगे ले देबे ते थोबा namsha che de keran tongba ni she gdo simje nyang len ta me do asura lomba samre ma to lomba samma to o ti se do tin de de ya
So here, then it continues, and sometimes I read from different translations, but here, if it is illusory due to another, or sort of just merely inflated, like it doesn't have any actual existence, then how can sentient beings go beyond misery? If these are all mere sort of like projections, aggrandizements of mind, then what is the point of teaching emptiness, of teaching sentient beings to go beyond suffering? Because none of this is really there at all. And so the kind of they would say that this is sort of like something where, in the way that, and in India, we have to remember that there would have been many poisonous snakes as well. This is sort of like mistaking a striped rope for a snake. So, say when it's dark out and there's something coiled up and it has sort of like a little bit of striping on it, and you see it from a distance, you think that there's a snake, like, oh my God, there's a poisonous snake, and all of a sudden this fear arises. But really, there is no snake there. And so here they're saying, well, if that's how you see all phenomena, as being these mere sort of delusions, mere kind of inflations of mind, then really what is to be done for sentient beings? There's nothing that's actually there.
Uma be kelam be kunzu tu ye ba sheba dini se ta uma len ja yo ra uma be pa uma be kunzu tu ye se dini se go ra dini se de uma be kunzu tu ye se ti kiran se na shimar ta se lomba samma do me se semetru ba me se go mar dini shensim nam do te se ro ene dene range kunzu min se uma be kelam be kunzu tu ye ba se de se ora ani shin la tu lo lo she chi ge ba lom ba cham bi sha ba yin se ge o ma re se ora ro de ne shen sen nam do de de rang ge kunzu me uma be sha kunzu te she number she ba chi pa lo be she ba chi lom ba cham la sha ba ma re se ora de rang ge kunzu tu de ba ta ti ma re se ora ani chi de nge na te ye te se chi de ye na te ye te so kala inde lomba cha te ne oma ba rang ge kunzu tu ye be tanda ma yin se ro rang ge lo ne lu to be ta we yu to de be che tham je se ne lu to be yu to de be che tham je rang shin ge tong ba to be che re rang shin ge tong ba to be che re rāngshīn kī tōngbā tōgbē chērī kēchā rō kēchā lā sōgbē chāchī kūnzu dē tēsam māyīmbar tā tēzō kāngā kūnzu bā tēzō kāngā rāngshīn kī trūpa yuwa mārē tēne tāgbā tsam bīsī wrā tēne tōgbē tāgbā tsam tō tsēmē trūpa chī shā gu rē sē tamchē tsēmē trūpa chūjī nibar yoban jo nunase jo tumna te kunzure setrubre kunzu temba de simje tungé nyoa de wonde trane seme truba tungé nyongwe adese kunzu de kunzu wonde trane shagi od mato lo lomba sam yo lokshe kyanja resi yo mar rangwene truba rangshin ki truba de lo lomba sam lokshe ki ticha mato tanda yo mar shegi yo mato ti kunzu be che to tinde shegi yo mar sura kunzu do yebe tenje Teta member Ranlula, Shaji Seme, Truba Jo Meshiba, Kunzutoya, Truba, Yamso, Shawa Cheba Kunzuto, Simje Tunga Nyawata, Tawa Nyawala Soba Tezo Shaya Mana, Lulum Batsam Bashi Insan, Segio Marese. Tina Simje Yangali Dabal Soba, Tarba Toya, Tezu Meba Chagra, Shaji Tamje Meshiba, Kunzuto Trubaya, Kunzuto Trubaya, Meba Nyamso Ose. Ota kunzu tu se kunzu tu kanga lo lo she ge ta fa ma re se ro ta nye be cheme ba ta fa cham ji cha che ro de sha ko re sim je tong ge nyo de yo ra ra wen ne tu be tong ge nyo se yo mar ma tong ge nyo de yo re ti me na ni ning ji de chang ju sim de tu kanga me ba cha do ra o ya ti shi na
So here then the response to this that is given by the Madhyamikas then comes in verse 107.
Ở đây Trung Quán
So
thừa nhận rằng là có
this is quite difficult to translate exactly, but it says that this mental superstition apart is not our illusion.
là Trung Quán
If it is
thực
not
tế
subsequently ascertained, it exists. If it is not, it is not even an illusion.
không phải là thực
So
tế mà
here, the kind of conventional existence that is accepted by Madhyamikas is not one in which it is just these things are all mere projections of mind, that they're just delusions and there's no sort of basis in reality, or that there isn't a way to posit that these are the objects of valid cognitions. So it's not as though, as the opponent says, like these are all just mere delusions, you know, like projecting a poisonous snake onto a striped rope. But while it is the case that phenomena, conventional phenomena, all phenomena, but conventional phenomena are not existent from their own side, they don't have that kind of true existence as they appear to our mind, but they are able to be posited by valid cognition. We can distinguish something as being this or that based upon their sort of the validity of the cognitions perceiving them. So here, when we refer to existing in an illusory manner, it is not the meaning of our own middle way system to assert that to assert it as merely elaborated as existent by the mental superstition of true grasping, but rather what is being said is that this awareness is mistaken with respect to the kind of true existence. That true existence is a mere projection of mind, but it's not as though the kind of happiness and suffering, these other sorts of things that are mere dependent designations, are utterly non-existent, but rather it is the case that we can talk about there being help and harm and so forth in a way that is established validly without asserting that there is some kind of true inherent existence. So if there were no way to assert happiness or suffering, benefit or harm, then what would be the point of doing anything? So it's not as though the conventional is a mere projection that just has no reality whatsoever. But when the Madhyamikas talk about phenomena being merely conventionally existent or illusory, it is with respect to their appearing as truly existent that they are merely projecting that, not in terms of just the mere bare existence of the phenomena itself. This.
Ranlugi di xiaozu di xeudua, kunzu xiaozu di xeudua, dodan dakbar chawa daase, dodan dakbar chawa daase, right? Ranlugi kunzu xiaozu di kante resne, dakbar daase, ne dakje yu nibu di sigora, dodan se nambar toba lepa dangeng loti chera, dodan dakbar chawa se ne yu di che, dodan dakbar chawa daase. Nibu penzu tenpa desu. Te yu le teni yu chen de shaya da, yu bal teni yu chen shaya, yu chen ki chi toya yu bal teni yu shaya, penzu tene trubi resi wara. To da takbar chawa da, nibu penzu tenpa yin se rwa. Chidara chakpa la teni se, jikten ki chakpa la teni se, nambar cheba tamche se. Jikden le chakpe wangi, jikden ki tanya le chakpe wangi, namsha tamche che wale se kudwa. Dreba malo ne dhira. Ranglu ji kunzum jo chu ni se, tokpa dansi. Takbar shawa yu ni se, tenzu teni truba sha wale se wale. Ti tsashi le sung sha, chebu le la tenche se, le jan chebu tenye la, teni juwa mato truba jin mara. Shing cheba bo se na, cheba bodorwa. Ti pika shing reji chi shu ni pika le chi che ne, 싱 tumbu 로서나 텔레 뜨네네 자와체네 제밥도 샤고라 제밥도 예발 때네 자와도 샤고레스 펜주 찌질로 뜨네 샤고라 뭐 라와도 술로 뜨면 그제 코나수랑원에 수투에지 말으시거라 아 제보래라 텐체지 레게 제보tin 펜주 템바도 뜨네 적바 인게 라게 뭐요 투바 중세게 요 말으세 지가르 지dengi tanyela seme trakba shindo jidengi tanyebe semala trakba shindo ro jidengi tanyebe semala de kaware de pumbare de tewa nyongo to tongye nyongo ore yakbundu tokbundu se jiden tanye chiore kuna jebana shi shagore sora jidengi tanyela chida trakba shindo mingzamla tene chawa jingengwa buda kashi sode tele mingji tashagora te tsamla shagore se tene takbatsam 직대로 잡배왕게 명점세 명점스도 명게 왕게 파샤 뭐도 유코라 뭐네 추주에 매바서라 명게 왕게 샤바스 똑배 왕게 샤바스 최탐세 똑배 왕게 샤바스 때네 딱바점 세트시거라 지더러 타니베 세말라 잡바신도 명점라 때네 넘버 줘봐 남샤 탐제 줘버 줘봐 어때 남샤 삼마 탐제 직대지 잡벌레 때네 때네 딱 봐서 샤워래 배나 데캄버레스 콘데지 캄베 콘데지 토네 토레지 토네 데캄버레샤 따소나 진지대를 잡버레 때다 캄버레 때 삼샤 다 캄버 가그레스 유랑원에 주거든데 제대는 예요 말에 텐데 초벌레 때네 르파 따네 직대를 잡데 다 딱베 주버래 직대지 잡아도 keleng 거래 대나시래 뭐 유메세된 지는 당했더네 마다 마셔니 지 데캉버르다서 지 주주세케요 마라 코나미탄 때서를 데캉버르스라라 아주 초가르스라라 또 다게 데서 초가르 초되어라 또 초가 그대로 토아데르 마데르베 데서요 마라 지대 잡아야 때네 딱 봤잖아 잡아야 온게 샤고라 명점세 때라 명가르다나 타냐 가르다나 티스타네 다게 침바셔고래 다게 릭바셔고래 똑베 따삼세 기샤고래스 군좀 저주디 텐데레스 펜주 직실을 떠신데네 링보다 통우세라 버리다 추리세라로 신보다 충주세라 야보다 도구세라 강가 직실을 떠는 샤고래스 어디 지람나 리도 야
So then turning to verse 108, it says, the conceptual mind and the conceived object are mutually interdependent. All analysis is experienced in dependence upon and in accordance with common sense, or we could say renowned in the world. And so as for our own sort of systems asserting of conventional existence, all phenomena are merely dependently designated. And so the mind and the object, here we could say the sort of conceptual, the conceptual thought and the thing that it imputes are mutually dependent. And just as in dependence on renown, all investigations are expressed, or we could say that it is in dependence upon renown in the world that we are able to posit various things. It is in accordance with that that we can say something is or isn't a particular phenomena. So here, the mind and its object or any things really are dependently designated, are mutually dependent in the same way that as is explained in Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, that it is like the actor is established independence upon the action. So if you have someone who is cutting down wood, chopping it up into pieces, then we can speak about there being a wood cutter. But the action of cutting the wood and the wood cutter, those are mutually mutually dependent. You can't have one in the absence of another. And so here, when it comes to all phenomena within the world, they exist due to worldly renown, as in they are dependently designated. We give a name to a particular phenomena, and it only exists by the force of name, by the force of thought, not from its own side in any way. And so this is the nature, the way, or the sort of mode of existence of all phenomena. We can talk about, like we see the roof of something and we say, oh, there's a house over there, and that accords with the renown within the world. But if we were to try to look for something more, to actually find that thing, we can't find that. Like we're here in this assembly hall, right? And we can say that we're here in this assembly hall. But if we are to ask, well, where is that really? Like to try to find that thing, you can't actually find something. You can't go and actually point to something and say, yes, this is it. But rather, it is something that merely exists through renown. And it exists in this way that is, there's this dependence upon positing with name and thought a particular object. It exists in that mutually contingent kind of way. And when we speak about, oh, there's an assembly hall here, this is in the context of not going into that kind of ultimate investigation and analysis, trying to find that thing, but rather being satisfied with it being a mere name, a mere label, and that it is something dependently designated and mutually contingent, and being sufficient, like that being sufficient for its existence. So we are out of time for today, so we will leave it there for now.
Chime jambe wambo jambe yang kanchi kipi suje songa ba la sa ya lo so wande